From a musical family at all?
Yes, my father was an ear piano player. By the age of 12, he was playing anything he heard, so I sort of inherited it. My mother, of course, sang while washing dishes. She had a really wonderful voice, but she mostly, nothing professional.
So would you say it was through them that your musical interest began to develop?
Absolutely. I think I just inherited not only the love for it, but the understanding of it. I was able to, at a very young age, determine notes in a chord and be able to sing them, correctly, separately. So I think I inherited hearing music definitively,
Now, in your early years, you spent some time as a street corner singer.
Well, actually, it was a doo-wop, a bunch of guys got together and they sang a cappella some of the songs that were on the radio, some we wrote ourselves, and I spent from the time I was 13 till the time I was 20 doing that with my buddies.
Did that experience at all, do you think, helped you in later years developing your own stage manner and your performance skills?
I don't think it sort of did. When I did that with these guys, I was never the lead singer. I was never the one who sang the words. I was always in the background, and I was the guy pulling out his hair, keeping everybody on key, and and also doing choreography and writing songs. But I was never the lead singer. So I didn't have any intentions of ever singing alone. Even when I went to Greenwich Village, it was through poetry that I actually went there, when the beatniks were around.
Yeah.
And we found out what that word meant after they had been calling us beatniks, me and my friend in Brooklyn. We didn't even know what it meant, but we read an article in the papers and found out what it meant, or what it suggested anyway. It turns out it suggested artistic people of all kinds, but most of them were poets when we went down there. So I went to the Greenwich Village to read poetry, and I heard quite a few songs that were not rock and roll or not doo-wop songs. They were more or less, they had historical value, they had a much deeper message, and many of them changed my life. So within the 2 years of doing portrait work, which is what I did for 2 years down there, I drew people's faces. I ended up with a sort of a group of songs that had changed my life, and which is the songs that I actually started singing when I first picked up the guitar, and I tend to still do the same thing now.
It must have been an exciting place to be, Greenwich Village, during that time. It
was incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. I mean, you name it, everyone was there. There was everyone. I mean, from David Crosby as a single performer, Joni Mitchell as a single performer, Stephen Stills as a single performer, and then all the traditional guys, Tom Rush and John Hammond Jr., and, people like that, Odetta, and every American comedian you could think of. They were all there.
I've, over the years, spoken to quite a few people who were part of that scene, and they all seem to mention that there was no real sense of competitiveness as such between people. There was a real sense of community, artists helping each other out.
That's right. There really wasn't. We had the opportunity of having coffee houses in which we could go to and either try out songs or actually just sing them because we felt them. And we used to play like 3 coffee houses a night, going back and forth, and 14 sets a night, 7 days a week, 7 years in a row. For real. And everybody was there. So we would go from coffee house to coffee house. I mean, later on, it got to be so many people that we actually had to sign up to get to play at one point. But the big winner was the coffee house, because they sold everything and they made their money, but we weren't being paid. So they were the big winners. We ended up the big winners because we're still here and they're not.
Exactly, yeah. Now, your guitar style is very synonymous with you. I guess you could call it a very percussive way that you play. Was there any particular inspiration for you developing that style, or was it just a natural progression that you picked up?
No, there was inspiration, and part of it was that I'm a frustrated drummer, and the other part was that I heard Freddie Neal and Dino Valente as single performers, both of which were really, really incredible rhythm guitarists, and those two inspired me the most.
One thing you've also been renowned for over the years is your interpretations of other songwriters' songs. Does a song have to have a particular quality for you to make it one that you want to quote?
Yes, it does.
What are you looking for?
It has to be a finished song. It's called the quality of finished song. It should not leave anyone thinking. It shouldn't leave anyone in question. It should have a content that is spoken about in the first verse or two, and then an emotion that the person who wrote it or is singing it within the lyric is actually feeling, and then it should have an ending, which is what I call the finished song. And it should have an ending. It should tell us something. It should sum up something. It should give us a direction. It should take away a direction that may be wrong. It should do something.
You've always seemed to have made a point also of putting your own individual stamp on the song rather than just cover it as such. And I guess that's something that's always been important to you?
Well, it's kind of automatic. I used to think that I was singing the song the same way I heard it.
Really?
Absolutely. Yeah? I don't usually change the chords of any of them, in terms of the basic progression. So it's more the sound of my guitar, which is always 6 strings being played at the same time, which is not a sound that you can get unless you're barring all of the chords and when it's tuned correctly. So I had that wide chord and a lot of suspension sounds, which I was able to produce from an open tuning of a D chord, and it was just by a whim that I tuned it that way because I had heard that chord many times, and in terms of when I grew up and sang with a sort of a family choir in churches. We did a lot of programs in different churches, and there were always gospel singers, 5 guys like doo-wop with one guitar player, and he would always play a chord, and they would tune up to it vocally, and then sing their song. Well, that was the chord I tuned my guitar to. Turns out to be an E chord structure in the key of D.
For the 90s, but we're really tonight with one of the key players. Have you received any memorable feedback over the years from songwriters whose songs that you covered?
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Oh, yes. Just about all of them, tell you the truth. One of the best for me was an experience I had in Greenwich Village when I went down to a coffee house to see some friends of mine, because I was just passing by actually on the way home, and I realized that my 2 different groups of people or 2 different entertainers I knew were playing, so I stopped down to say hello. One was the Chambers Brothers, who had done the song Time, eventually, and the other one was Jimi Hendrix. So I just stopped down to say hello, and when I walked in the door, the doorman said, "Hey, Richie, hang out for a little while. My brother's coming down. He'd love to say hello." And I didn't know who his brother was. So I sort of hung out after I spoke to everybody, and it turned out that his brother was a chauffeur that had driven me to a gig, and he walks in with Paul McCartney and John Lennon. Blew my mind.
I bet.
And so here I am sitting with my back to the wall in a very quiet corner, and he comes walking right up to the table facing me, cornering me with John Lennon and Paul McCartney. And I couldn't say anything, of course. My mouth was on the floor. And they sat down, and they went on, about the Eleanor Rigby that I had done, which was the first one on my first album. So, and we eventually met many more times over that time.
What a great story.
That was a big one for me.
I bet. Now, tell us about the college circuit in the 60s. You had a special connection to the college audiences there, I believe.
Well, we had the Vietnam War. We had a bunch of different things going on here, civil rights. We had all of these things going on. And I think, of course, the college kids were very much a part of that movement in that they were the prime for the pickings, to go. And so they related to a lot of the songs that we sang as different singers in terms of anti-war songs and stuff like that. And I had the first 7 years that I went on the road, I would say 70% of it was colleges, universities. So I played probably every university in this country at least 4 or 5 times, and every state, as far as colleges go. And so we came up together.
I guess even nowadays you must come across people who probably followed you through those college years as well.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Most of my audience today was there and said, oh, I saw you at Kent State, or I saw you at this one, I saw you. Most of them.
Yeah.
Most of them.
You got some long-standing fans from that circuit, yeah. Difficult to talk to you and not mention your performance at Woodstock.
Well, I've had to talk about it every day since. So
I'm sure you have.
There's no reason not to talk about it today. To me, it was very important. It did have a very big significance for me because, first of all, what many people may not know is that Woodstock for us was when we, as a group of many ages, were de-radicalized just by our presence together at this event. And I've been the guy who's been sort of keeping the record straight every day that someone asks me about it, because interestingly enough, the newspapers signed off after it was over to 500,000 people. It has gotten less and less as I've come through the years, and there's new young people on the radio, and they go, oh, 250,000 New Yorkers. And I go, no, 850,000 people from all over the world. Every state in the Union except Hawaii was represented. And that we were of like mind. We had our nation at stake. And that's why we came together. And little do people know also that Woodstock was supposed to happen at least 7 times before it did. So the press, who actually made a career out of putting it down, were the ones who actually caused it.
Just going on with your own particular performance there and your memories of your day there, if you had one lasting memory to take with you, what would it be?
Wow. It would be, to me, 2 memories, the beginning and the end. Flying over, being the first one to fly over to get to backstage because every road was blocked, including the New York Thruway. To fly over all of these people and to realize that we had accomplished radicalization just by that many people. I knew if this picture ever made the newspapers, they could not hide us anymore. Because as far as the rest of the nation went, we were a very fractional, small, marginal group. Meanwhile, we were really citizens of all ages all over the country. And it gave us the forum to come together when it was finally said that it was happening. That was the first time, and I really flew over those people. I went, well, they can't hide us anymore, which happens to be the name of the book that I just finished.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for Avon Publishing. And the other thing was being on stage. I was supposed to be on for 20 minutes, like everyone else. Well, being the first one over and their inability to get anybody else there, I was on stage for 2 hours and 45 minutes. So I sang everything I knew, and I went off for the 6th time. And they told me, one more time, one more song. And I went back, did didn't know what I was going to do, which is why there is a very long intro to Freedom. Because I was stalling. I didn't know what I was going to do. Meanwhile, the word freedom came out of my mouth because I was actually, I was in a position. I had to think of what I was going to sing, and what had happened was I looked out over the crowd and I said to myself, it's interesting because from the 1950s as teenagers till now, we've been talking about freedom, the freedom we were supposed to have as Americans and not have, and here it is. We're doing it right now, and this is the winning game right here. And so the word freedom came out. Then Motherless Child came out, which I hadn't sung in about 8 years, since early Village days, just the verses. And then in the middle of that, a verse from another hymn came out that I hadn't sung since I was 16 with the family that I sang with early on. So it formulated right there on stage.
What resulted was probably the most legendary piece of musical padding out of all time, I guess.
Yeah.
I believe you weren't all that happy about going on at first.
No, I wasn't, because the concert was 3 hours late, and I thought, gosh, they're going to throw beer cans at me, So I refused to go on first because I was supposed to be number 5. And I was going, no, Michael, I'm not going out there. They're going to kill me for you? No, it's your concert that's late. So they finally convinced me to do it. And I thought at this particular point somebody better do something or else there may be a riot. So after 3.5 hours late, and people sitting out there for a week before, I said, well, time to go on. So I went, and I went out and did it. And the first thing that happened, of course, when I went out was that everybody was so happy that something was happening that I felt totally comfortable at that point.
It would have been, I guess, difficult to take in the enormity of it all at the time. Did you have time to do that, or wasn't it till later that you really had time to reflect and appreciate the significance of the event?
Oh, no, I knew it when I first flew over.
Yeah.
The significance to me was that we finally made it. We finally made it to a place where they could not radicalize us anymore. They could try, but it was then obvious to many in the country who may not have known who they were radicalizing, which was just about everyone who was anti-Vietnam or anti-civil rights or whatever. Pro-civil rights, that these were just plain people. They were just Americans, I think that, as far as I'm concerned, my generation was the very first real Americans, because they taught us all in school. I think my generation was probably the largest generation to hit the schools post-World War I. That's why they call us the baby boomers. But we were the largest generation to go to school together from all over the world. But we were largely first-born Americans in many cases and grew up together. And so I saw it as a really an American thing. As far as I'm concerned, it was at the first American People's Festival.
Now, just moving on a bit, you formed your own label in the 70s, not something, I guess, that was too common in those days. Was there any particular motivation for you to do that?
Yes, protecting myself and not getting ripped off by record companies.
There was a lot of that going around, wasn't there?
Oh, gosh, that was the way of the day. I mean, what they did then, and I dare say they still do today, is that they would ship out, say, tell you they shipped out 15,000 albums, and actually they shipped out 25, and they would get the 10 right off the top. And if they got the 10 off the top and everything slowed down in the 15, they said that it was yours. Then they already got paid, you see, and you would be paying the returns for what they, you understand?
Yeah, sure.
So I was told by actually one of the guys who was the promotion guy and within MGM that I should ask for my own label. That I was doing so good on the label as a performer that they would give it to me, and I did. And I ended up with a label that at the time was unheard of. It was 1970 when we started, And not only that, by 1972, or just early 72, when we renegotiated, I ended up with actually the first people to manufacture my records through another record company, so that I could count them before they got them. So I really, in the beginning was really paid correctly, and as it should have been in the first place. And I was able to protect myself and all of the people that I got to record as well on that label.
Now, in later years, you branched out into acting as well. Did you harbour any ambitions in that field beforehand?
Not really. I was convinced by a gentleman from England who actually was the first person to put the Beatles on TV, and he created Shindig and Hullabaloo, those programs which were sort of folky and rocky kind of music for English television. His name was Jack Good. He followed me for a year, trying to convince me to play Othello on screen in a musical, sort of a musical, and modern. It wouldn't have been, of course, the costumes of the times, but it was done in the King's English, even though it was modern. So it was called Catch My Soul, and that was the first film I ever did. I started out with Othello.
How do the two compare for you, performing music for an audience or performing for a camera?
Well, I think performing for an audience is always, that's what I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I did 7 years in Greenwich Village in little coffee houses with people sitting right under my feet, and that's my audience, living people. And that's what I do today. I have been on the road since 1967, the end of 67. The first 7 years was like 6 days a week. And then after that, I thought I was doing myself a favor by doing weekends. Well, I've been on the road every weekend since. And now it's getting crazy because now all the young guys are asking for the oldest songs. And I'm just starting my career, as far as I'm concerned. This is the beginning for me.
Changed much as a live performer over the years?
I'm sorry?
You think you've changed much as a live performer? You're
Not at all.
On stage persona?
I call myself a song singer.
Yeah.
And that's what I do. The songs come to me and move me, and I sing them, and that's it. I don't force myself to write anything. When I do write, it comes through me rather than me thinking it up. And that's what happens. I'm very fortunate in that sense.
How about audiences? Have you found they've differed much?
Absolutely not. They're just getting younger, that's all. I mean, interestingly enough, when I started, of course, colleges had an age group, that we could see were young. But in between those colleges, I was doing festivals, like folk festivals, rock festivals, jazz festivals, and I was also doing clubs, and I was also doing concerts within towns, like regular concerts. So I found that at concerts and festivals, all ages came.
Mm-hmm.
And colleges, well, we had that age. Some clubs were in college towns, so we had the same age, but some clubs were not. They were almost bars, that would sometimes have jazz and or folk music, so they were a little bit older. So I've always played to every age. Today, it's just about the same. However, I think today the younger audience has got about 22% more more of a hold on the audience than ever before.
After all these years, quite amazingly, we haven't had the pleasure of having you down here to play for us in Australia.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and I know why.
Really?
Because I might not even leave if I came. I have had a feeling that for Australia since I was about 8 years old, and I saw National Geographic. Something was calling me to that place since I was 8 years old. I once had an experience of meeting two Australian gentlemen in England visiting a friend of mine, and I had the forum to ask them. There was something in Australia that was pulling at me, and I didn't know what it was. I said, it's in the center somewhere. I know it's in the center, and I feel this magnet thing pulling me. And they went, oh, you must mean Ayers Rock. I said, what is that? And when they told me, I said, well, I wouldn't put it past it. That could be the thing, that could be it. But there's something about that land that I somehow have some kind of sense memory to. I feel very connected to it, and I've always felt that there's one reason that I might not have gotten there yet is that I might not leave.
Well, you'd be welcome to stay. That's for
the
sure.
Only one I could come up with. I can't wait to get there. I'll tell you that.
We'd love the opportunity to see you for sure.
And well, if anybody's interested, just call me, bring me over, please.
I'll put a word around there for sure. Now,
gosh.
I believe you did voiceover work for advertising in recent years.
Some, not a lot. People think it's a lot because I've had 3 imitators, who's one of which sounds so much like me that I even thought it was me. But no, I had 3 imitators. I did a few. I've done about maybe, I would say 6 in all of these years. One of them was on television for 9 years, which was Amtrak. It's the trains, the national train system here. And I love trains, which is why I did that one. There were different reasons for doing them. It's not something I looked to do. I never looked for them. The ones that I actually did, I acquiesced to doing for a reason.
Yeah. Now, I think you wrote to me a few weeks back that you're working on a new album at the moment.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, it's called Wishing Well, and it's a collection of songs that I feel, the way I do albums is basically a title will come to me of the album, not necessarily the title of a song. I think I've only done one album which had a song title name to it. Actually 2. One was pretty early on, and the other one was a little bit later in the 80s. But all of the rest of them, which there are maybe 18 or 19 of, they were titles, concept titles, under which a circle of songs fit. And the circle of songs were sort of more or less covering the whole circle of context of the title. And so, just like always, this one is called Wishing Well, and the songs will be songs of wishing you well as things we wish.
And musically on the album, we got some backup players alongside you there?
There's always a few on some songs. There may be some without. And some with, but I've never really done large musical things behind the albums. It's always been sort of a group that, maybe drums, bass, guitar, some percussion, some stuff like that. But this one will be fairly acoustic.
Do you enjoy the studio environment still?
Yes, I do. It's a place where magic can happen if you go in there without any idea of what you really want to do. I'm always a last-minute man, It's like most of the stuff I do in the last minute because I think it's the most honest time for me to do it. I don't want to think about it for a year. I have always collected songs that move me. Many of them make it to the stage, and some of them make it to records, but I think that every record I've ever done, there was always 1 or 2 songs that didn't make the album. And they would just linger on till the next album, and sometimes become the basis of the suggestion of what title would come to me. In other words, a title would come to me, and I'd realize, boy, these songs actually fit in this next sort of cog, and and sometimes they didn't. So I have a collection of songs that never got to record, and then through the years, some of the concepts that come, they may, one or two of them may fit because they were probably ahead of their times, or a little bit too solid for our times, you know, and their time comes. So it's sort of a mixture of songs that I've collected sometimes, and then sometimes they're just there. All of them come to me at the last minute.
And what sort of time frame are we looking at for a release on this one?
Hopefully, I'm going to be finished by the beginning of December, I would say, because I'm working like every week, and I got to do this in between.
Yeah.
I'm working like up to February already, almost. I mean, I got, you know, and it's been that way since March this year. They've been booked, so I have to, you know, make sure that in my own thinking that I sort of think to take time out for myself even. I don't hesitate to just keep going. I've been going since I started, haven't stopped once, and I don't intend to. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen right in the middle of what is happening.
Sure. Just before we wind up, if a young artist came to you with looking for advice, just starting out, and you had just a couple of minutes to spare, what would be the main piece of advice you'd made sure you gave them?
Well, I think the main piece of advice is if they really want to do what they think they want to do, just do it, even if they have to do it for free. Because I think that in and of itself is where you really learn whether you really want to do it or not. Mm-hmm. I mean, we passed the basket for 7 years, just about, and it was the joy of being able to do it, and to be able to have people sitting in chairs in front of us, even if we weren't getting paid, to be able to express ourselves. And I think there's so many young people out there today that can really express themselves that it's a crime if they hold it back from the audiences they could get on a street corner or in a subway or underground or whatever. And I think that's the main thing. Play your music for anyone who will listen, just for the sake of getting them to hear it. And eventually, you will not only get the best feedback as to what you're doing from these audiences, but you will get the best encouragement as well.
Sound advice. Okay, Richie, look, I won't hold you up anymore. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I want to thank you for your time.
Oh, my pleasure.
And hopefully we'll get to catch you down here sometime in the near future.
I hope so, too.
You've got an audience ready and waiting. We'd love to see.
Well, you know, if nobody calls me, I'm just going to come.
Oh, good.
It's due, you know.
Oh, well and truly.
I have to.
Thanks again.
Sure.
Thanks again for your time and for all that wonderful music over the years, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Richie.